What's up guys, I'm Ben and this is Kame Trick, the channel where we work on our dailies so that we can get money so we can party with our friends by shredding in grassroots drift cars. Today's video features a car that never makes enough appearances on the channel, my 1989 EF Civic Si. Today we're going to be rebuilding the brake drums in this car because they are in pretty bad shape. I have got new drums, I've got new spring kits, I've got new shoes. These brake shoes crack me up. I mean, they're teeny tiny. It's all getting done. Let's get to it. We're going to be jacking the car up and putting it on the jack stands so that we can work on this wheel. And there we go. That reveals the rear drum brake, which we can see here. Next, we're gonna need to pop this drum off. So this is very straightforward. Just get these started. Wow, all right. That was actually easier than I anticipated. And then they make handy little tools to pull these off with. And wow, look at that brake dust that just popped out of here as soon as I set that down. Oh, that is gnarliness. So this side is in pretty good shape. I mean, it's kind of a crypt in here. It's coated in brake dust. The pad material is worn down very asymmetrically. It's incredibly thin here at the top, and then it gets quite thick down at the bottom. First up, we're gonna clean this thing off a little bit. To keep the brake dust down, we're gonna blast this entire thing with brake clean. And you can bet I'm gonna wear a little bit of face protection, mainly to keep this crap off of my glasses. Here we go. Absolutely gnarly. While I give that a moment to dry, we can take a little bit closer look at the inner materials here. See how nice and clean everything became once we hit it with that brake cleaner. Now this is my first time doing brake drums on a car, but I do understand the principle behind them. So you have one actuator here with two little pins, and these push apart like that, and that pushes this portion of the brake shoe out into the edge of this housing on the inside, and that's what causes all your braking force. And that is why in this case the top, which is where it gets pushed out, is wearing much more significantly than as I get at my own light source with pro camera skills, much more than the bottom is wearing. And then all this is held in place by a series of springs. Last but not least, in here is a self-adjuster. As they wear down, both this material here and your drum, it's going to push out a little bit further so that you continue to get rear brake assist. I'm gonna start by removing the clips here and here on each side. To get these apart, I'm just going to grab this, push in and turn it. And that's going to allow these pieces to come out like so. And then this little pin will just push right out of the back. I'll do the same on the other side. That's gonna let these have some play, as you can see. And now we can take off some springs. All right, that gets this piece loose. Next up, I'm gonna get this bottom spring off. And I'm gonna do it by coming in from underneath of it here like this and sort of pulling and twisting away. Okay, there we go. Now with nothing holding the sides or bottom in, with any luck, we can just pull this apart, and this large top spring we can take out outside of the placing here. The e-brake is still attached down at the bottom. So this self-adjustment piece came out. This little clip for that self-adjustment piece literally just fell out. This shoe will get freed pretty easily from the spring. We'll pull the spring out. I'm gonna go ahead and take off this whole brake assembly by pushing it forward and working it out. And this piece, I've got to kind of attack this little horseshoe bit. And there we go. That actually worked a lot better than I thought it would. That's gonna let this lift up and out. We will need to reuse this lever for the e-brake, and then it has a little pin and a little washer as well. We'll be reusing both of those. I'm gonna make sure that I clean these surfaces off and get them nice and smooth. And I'm also going to be going into all of these little pads here, there's 3 on each side, and getting them cleaned off. We do have to rehabilitate this auto adjuster. Let's get this thing back together. Here's what we've got. I've got brake clean, I've got some towels. I do have a couple of tools that I'm gonna be using because I noticed a few small issues with the brake shoes. Yeah, here it's not big enough to fit. It just doesn't quite go. Compare that to this, where it clicks in significantly further. So I'm gonna have to clearance this area just a little bit, and I'm gonna use my angle grinder for that. Second of all, this pin, it doesn't fit through the hole either. And that's enough for that piece. And that's enough for that piece. There we go. I'm gonna start by putting the emergency brake lever back onto the brake shoe. So if we were looking at it from the side of the vehicle, the lever would go behind the shoe, these holes would line up, then this piece would push through from the back to the front side. Next, we're going to lock this in place by putting this little washer over, and then this horseshoe clip. There you go. We'll want to make sure this can move freely. So now this piece is going to fit on the vehicle right here. So I'm going to pull the brake cable out, pull up this spring. Okay, now is a good time to go ahead and get a little dollop of anti-seize and put it on these pads here. It's a good time to go ahead and do this brake auto adjuster. Make sure that it's going to have nice smooth play. And ultimately you're going to be putting anti-seize onto the hub surface as well. I'm going to do that in a later step, but that's going to help prevent the brake drum from sticking in the future. Next we're going to swing this up and around. It's going to end up sitting in here like this. And we're going to put the pin through the back, push it up through into the front. I'm going to use the needle nose pliers to slot this in, and then once I have it kind of angled the way that I want for that silver piece, I'm going to push past it and turn this clip, and then when I release it, it's going to hold that brake shoe in place. It's not perfectly in place, of course. This slot here needs to have that go into it like that. And there's a slot on the bottom that it's nowhere near that it needs to go into like that. But as you can see, you can adjust it. And once we get the springs on, especially the top spring, it's gonna hold it in place and we'll be able to fine tune where all that sits. Next up, we're gonna be connecting the bottom spring. And we're gonna put it through the same spot here. And then we pull this around, and this will ultimately get pulled into place. We have also placed the brake adjusting tool here in. It's just in there lightly, it just is sitting in there. The only important note is that on this side where you've got your brake adjusting cable, there's a long fork and a short fork to this end piece, and you want the long fork to be out facing you. Next, we're going to put this clip here in on this side, and that's gonna hold this in. If possible, we do want to go ahead and get that positioned in there during that process, but there should be room to adjust it. We put this pin through the back, like so. We have to position this. It needs to be basically horizontal for the way that I'm installing these. Then our vice grip needle nose are gonna be MVP. We're going to put this through here, push that through, push past so that we can turn this without rotating the entire thing, and then release. I'm gonna go ahead and extend this piece, and you can do that by rotating this little star And I want to position it up in there like that. Okay, so that's got that in a much better position, and we can install the dreaded big spring. We're going to be hooking it into these spots. Please note that this kind of flat spot is going to go roughly over where those gears are. It does not touch them or connect in any way, but it goes this way, not that way. In my humble opinion, there's no real good way to demonstrate this, but I will say that you're going to want to grip your needle nose in this area. That's pretty helpful, and it gives you a fair bit of leverage. Then we'll go ahead and hook the far side. Oh boy, that's a long way. We're just gonna have to muscle it, and it's gonna take a few tries for me to get my body in the position where I can both see the hole and apply enough leverage. So yeah, stay tuned. That was a pain. So now we have that spring going across through there. You want these areas that we put the anti-seize on to be, yeah, a little higher, kind of like that, lining up with the metal here of the brake shoe. Next up, the adjuster tool is going to go on, pushes into this little hole, and then it kind of just goes up there. It does need to slide underneath of the brake adjuster there, so I'm gonna have to use both hands to get that. This adjuster wasn't actually back around this shoe as much as it needed to be. Tapped on it in a few spots, and then this big spring did its job and pulled this all together. So now it's all in there the way that it needs to be. This spring, it's gonna hook over that. Needle nose pliers and vice grips combo for the win. There you can see how that spring clips onto the top of that adjusting shim and then slides down into the bottom. The next step is to make sure that everything is clipped in where it needs to be and slotted into where it needs to slot at the top and the bottom. Try to get everything pretty close to the location and alignment that it needs to have. And it takes a little bit of finagling. Then you can put the brake drum on if you have everything positioned correctly. And if it doesn't fit, which mine is not wanting to, it's because these are too far out or they're just out of position. If you need to, you can take a flathead screwdriver and adjust that star to shrink these in even more, which is probably what I'm gonna have to do. All right, so I've completed those adjustments. This now slides on, and you generally want to adjust it such that there's a small, tiny amount of drag, like that you have contact, because those shoes don't push out that far. So you can see that doesn't spin really as freely, or about as freely as that does. So use your best judgment, figure that out. And then before you put it back together, apply some anti-seize to this surface here to help it not stick in the future. And some may not agree with this, but I apply just a little bit of anti-seize to the studs as well so that it's easy to get those off if I ever have any roadside issues. All that remains is to bleed the brakes, something I've been needing to do on this car anyway, and the process will be done. This was my first time doing drum brakes on a car, and it's not that hard of a job. There's a couple spots that are just a pain, the springs and the clips and things like that, but it's actually not a hard job, just a dirty one. So make sure that you're ready to clean yourself and your garage off when you are done. Hit that like button and be on the lookout for more EF Civic content. This is really a drift channel, but I do have the Civic and I will be working on it from time to time. You can bet that those are gonna get into the videos. Hope you guys have a good night. Peace.